Welcome back. Today I'd like to discuss the hitboxes in Apex Legends and use my background as a game developer to give insights on how systems like that generally work. But first, what exactly is a hitbox? Now obviously when you're playing a game, you do want to be able to shoot the enemy and register a hit. And there's various ways to do that, but one of the first iterations was, of course, a box, and that is where it got its name. Hitbox. So you're talking about old games like Doom or Duke Nukem, even the first Zeldas and NES games, it was just a giant box drawn over the character. Now this creates a very obvious problem in modern gaming. If you draw a box around the enemy you're shooting, you will create a lot of dead space that isn't the character that will register hits. So over time, as developers, we've gotten better at being precise around the character to make sure that what you're shooting is what you're seeing. Now, most modern shooters, what we'll do is use what's called mesh collision. The mesh is basically the art asset that you're seeing, the physical makeup of what you're looking at. And so we actually will be able to use the physical part of the body to contour the hit detection to what the character looks like. And this works great for realistic shooters like Call of Duty or Battlefield, because every character you're shooting at is a standardized humanoid. They're all adult humans, and they tend to follow the same outline. But when you look at games like Apex, which are more stylized and have androids, you can't exactly apply the same methodology. When you look at Pathfinder's physical being, he has very slender long legs, slender arms, and does actually have gaps in some of the limbs and body parts that he has. So if you were to take a Peacekeeper, or God forbid a Mozambique, and shoot it at Pathfinder using mesh detection only, you would shoot through a lot of the character in a way that you wouldn't with other characters. So how do we usually solve this problem? Well, what we'll do is we'll go in and put in manual hit detection for characters like that. We can take a physics asset of various shapes and sizes and attach it to parts of the skeleton of the character. So in Pathfinder's case, we can take a capsule and attach it to his thigh. Now with this added hit detection on Pathfinder's legs, his legs perform less like he skipped leg day and more like the rest of the characters on the cast. And that's what you're seeing when you're shooting Pathfinder. You're seeing excess hit detection around him, because if you didn't have that, it would feel pretty bad, trust me. Let's also quickly talk about added protrusions to characters. When you look at various characters that have arm packs, grenades, radio towers or backpacks on their back, or in Gibraltar's case, a shield sticking off his arm, we'll usually make sure these do not register hits for various reasons. We don't want the aesthetic choices of the art of the character to impact how you shoot the character. But also a very realistic example of why we do this is Gibraltar. Now, if you were to take a gun and fire at Gibraltar when he was running away from you, if the neck guard on the back of his body registered hits, you wouldn't be able to headshot him, right? It would be covering his head. Next, let's take a look at each individual character and how their hit detection works around their body. And I have to give Respawn big credit here. Apex Legends is a fantastically polished game and very, very well delivered. Now, you'll see on screen as I test each individual character, the hit detection on their body, if they have any added manual hit detection, and also if they have any protrusions on their body that register hits versus not. Now, most of the characters in the game are actually very accurate to their body, with the exception of Pathfinder, and it does look like most of the characters have a little padding on their chest and a little bit on their head, just to make the shooting a little bit easier. This isn't strange at all and is very commonplace. You'll also see me testing standing versus crouching. This is important because how the characters animate comes into play a lot with shooting at the character. We'll see a little bit later that as the characters move and run, some of them actually have different silhouettes when moving that makes it harder versus easier to shoot them. Now, I actually have a sneaking suspicion that Apex Legends was originally intended to be a hero shooter rather than a battle royale, but at some point in the development was pivoted to be a battle royale. You can see by the various character sizes, the skill sets, and the ultimates, and how the characters are put together. So let's take a look at the hero shooter Overwatch and see why this difference in size works there and doesn't necessarily work as well here in Apex Legends. In Overwatch, if you look at Winston and Reinhardt versus a Tracer and a McCree, the The size difference is actually very, very drastic. Now, each of the characters does come with a different HP pool and various properties to how the character plays, and this does make a difference. There's actually a main reason why this difference makes sense, and that one reason is the objective play. In Overwatch, all the main modes includes an objective, a payload, a capture point, something you're defending and holding. The need to interact with an objective makes these characters work well. If Reinhardt had nothing to defend, you wouldn't really pick him. He's slow, he can't really get kills, and if your only goal, like it is in a battle royale, is to survive and not die, most likely you're not going to pick those big characters. They're easier to hit, they can't secure kills, and it's harder to survive. But if you're on an objective and the damaged characters have to come to you, all of a sudden that works really, really well. And you can see a little bit of this working in Apex Legends now. For example, would you rather fight a Caustic in the field outside of airbase, or would you rather fight him inside of bunker? Everyone would pick outside of airbase, because when you're indoors fighting Caustic and he's throwing gas traps everywhere and he's blocking doors and gases all over the place, that is his home. He is so comfortable in that environment because his skill set works well in that area. And in fact, his larger hitbox is very easily offset by his overall strength indoors. The problem in Apex Legends is there isn't really objective play. You can choose where you want to fight, and your only goal is to survive to the end and kill everyone, which obviously when you look at a class-based, character-based game, there are going to be certain characters that are better at doing exactly that. Your Bangalores, your Wraiths, your Lifelines. These characters have smaller hitboxes, and most of their abilities are directly applicable in almost all combat scenarios. They don't need to be in a specific area defending an objective or fighting around a door to be effective. They can be effective anywhere. So that fact alone already writes off some of the characters as being very effective or useful in a true Battle Royale format. So inherently, with the way the kits are built right now, if there's only one objective in the game, and that's to survive as long as you can and kill everyone else, there will always be characters that are better at that than others. Characters like Caustic fall to the wayside because they're too inconsistent and they're easier to hit. Whereas in an objective-based game like Overwatch, which has all kinds of different scenarios, there are characters that are better at defending a payload versus a capture point, and that allows different characters to shine. But again, in a game like Apex, where that doesn't really change, you're going to want to pick the characters that are almost always useful with the way they play. Lifeline, Bangalore, Wraith, in some cases Mirage and Bloodhound. The characters that are also harder to hit. You're on the same playing field, you have the same weapons, you have the same health, you have the same armor, so why wouldn't you pick a character that's better at doing what you're trying to do? Now, it seems like Respawn's on the right path here. They're going to try and adjust, based on the data mining, the way the hitboxes work for the larger characters, and then you see how that works before you go into something more drastic. Now, the obvious suggestion, which I've seen a lot in the community, is, well, why don't we just change the stats like you do in a hero shooter for some of the characters? Like, why don't we just make Gibraltar have 20 to 30% more HP? It's a great question, but the challenge with this approach is it's a very, very slippery slope. There's not really going to be an easy way to get the right number to balance out how that character plays. So say, for example, you find through math that Gibraltar takes 20% more shots than other characters. So logically, couldn't you just increase Gibraltar's HP by 20%? The challenge there is it's not going to be the same amount of extra damage in all scenarios. Gibraltar inside a room up against a Peacekeeper will certainly take more shots than Gibraltar way across the map, so finding that Goldilocks number is not going to be easy, and in a lot of cases will destabilize how the game plays. Now, if we take our Overwatch example and we introduce objectives into the map, things that you need to defend or things that you can interact with, all of a sudden these objective style characters would work very well. Say, for example, you had a shop somewhere on the map where you could go and buy attachments like a precision choke or something like that. All of a sudden, someone like Gibraltar or Caustic make a lot of sense because they're holding a position. But in the absence of objectives like that, characters like Gibraltar and Caustic are just going to fall by the wayside. I'm Wraith with a Peacekeeper, and you're Gibraltar with a Peacekeeper. Who would you rather be? The answer is Wraith, of course. Up close, the ADS shield that Gibraltar has isn't enough to defend him, and you're not going to want to stand still that much anyway, and I'd much rather not be hit by errant pellets from the Peacekeeper as a Wraith than as a Gibraltar. Now, it is important to note that every character in the game does move at the same speed. This has been talked about a lot, but the trick here is raising the camera of the character higher up off the ground, which makes you feel like you're moving slower, and the 1P animations for the characters are slower, which does make you feel slower as well. So they move the same speed, they have the same health, they can use all the same weapons, and they have different sets of abilities, but some of them are easier to hit than others. And as it stands right now, it's going to be hard to find the right balance for where that works. Now, it was data mined that they're going to look at some adjustments to Gibraltar and Caustic and potentially even Pathfinder, and I think this is absolutely the best approach. Before you go and find drastic solutions or major changes to the game and how it plays, which honestly could make the game feel worse, a smart idea is to try to adjust the hitboxes on those characters to see if you can get them in line and get them closer and feeling good before you go for anything more drastic. Now, in the case of Pathfinder, because of the way the character is designed artistically, there's not going to be a scenario where you can shoot directly at what Pathfinder looks like. It's just not going to happen. His shape just doesn't allow for you to do that, and it would be too hard to hit as it stands. Now, let's talk a little bit about something that I haven't seen mentioned too much, and that's the animations and the poses for the characters in the game. This is actually very, very important because realistically, you're not going to be shooting at a character standing still in front of you, which you'll see in the hitbox testing before. Gibraltar's not going to just sit here and stand like this and let you shoot at him. He's going to be moving, he's going to be dodging. So what I did is I tested all the run animations, the crouch animations, the jump animations, the slide animations, and the vaulting animations for all the characters to see if there's anything that stood out with the way they move. Now remember, for all the characters in the game, they carry their collision with them as they animate. If it's a mesh collision, obviously if your arm goes up, your hit detection will move up with the arm. Even in cases of like Pathfinder where they have added collision on top of them, it is still attached to their skeleton, so if they animate, again, the hit detection will move with that animation. So take a look at all the characters on screen as they move about. One thing you'll see right away is some of the characters have a taller posture when they're running, when they're sliding, and also when they're crouching that allows them to be a lot easier to hit. Also, some of the characters tend to move very little when they're moving around. Characters like Bangalore, which, credit to the style of the character, that's exactly how a military trained personnel would operate with a weapon. But in some cases, this makes the character a little bit easier to hit because they're not moving around so much. I do want to highlight the way Pathfinder runs as well. And you see him on screen here, almost like Forrest Gump. He runs in a very goofy style where he will put his arms way out into the air and spread himself out very drastically. Now again, if you're using mesh collision for this, it would be very difficult to hit him because all of a sudden he creates a lot of negative space in his hit detection. But in the case of Pathfinder, where he does have these enlarged physics assets on his body, he's now spreading a lot of those Michelin Man balloons out into open space, which again makes him a little bit easier to hit. You can also see that characters like Wraith will lean back a little bit more when they're sliding, which makes it harder to hit them. And on top of that, Wraith's Naruto run, where she puts her arms backwards and runs low, makes her even harder to hit because it condenses her body. If you look at most military training or police training programs, when you're in a combat scenario, you want to make sure you are the smallest target possible, so condensing your mass is always a good thing to do, and that's exactly what characters like Wraith do. So it's not just about the overall size of the hit detection and the character, but it's also about how they move around. And on most accounts, Wraith is just generally the best. She's smaller, she moves in a way that makes sure her hitbox is more condensed. And with Wraith, with her ninja bandana sticking off into the air, remember, that has no hit detection. And so in a combat scenario where you're shooting at Wraith and you're seeing that bandana in your eye and shooting at it, you're not gonna register any hits. Pay close attention to the characters when they're aiming down sights versus when they're firing from the hips. You'll see that characters that have a more even proportion of their limbs to their body tend to have a smaller form when they're aiming down sights. This is because they'll bring in their arms and elbows and tighten up their form. Lifeline becomes almost like a pencil when she's aiming down sights. Compare that to larger characters like Caustic and Gibraltar. When they aim down sights, the limbs moving in and out have less of an impact. Now, these are a smaller percentage of the overall combat, so it doesn't mean you can't play Caustic or Gibraltar or you should flame anyone that does. Any character can be viable in the hands of someone who is skilled and lands their shots, but this is more talking about the higher echelon, the high skill tier of playing where every small advantage counts. So if you love playing Caustic, get out there and put those gas traps on the ground. It's not going to be a night or day difference for you, but if you're looking for that extra edge, there are some characters that just stand above the rest. If you like this video and you're looking forward to more, subscribe and turn on notifications. I love talking about game development and game design. So if you have questions for me, put them in the comments down below, or stop by my stream, twitch.tv/drybear, and let's have a conversation. And of course, thanks for being uniquely you.